Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Konnichiwa, Atheists in Recovery, and welcome to episode 104 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today we have neurosurgeon Dr. Paul Kaloostian on the show. And this episode was an interesting one. I never would have paired a neurosurgeon with medical poetry. Actually, up until this point, I had never even heard of medical poetry. But what we talked about in our episode today was, the best way to support your recovery and resilience is to keep your brain on your side. And as I'm sure you're aware, if the brain sees that the body wants certain drugs or is engaging in certain maladaptive behaviors, then the brain will adapt. It wants to be on your side. And so the inverse is also true. And we talk a little bit about the brain and how addiction affects the brain. And Dr. Paul says our brains are going to heal. That's a fact. And he also wants us to believe that there's never a time that we can't overcome any adversity or trauma or addiction. We're never too old. This is not about age. This is about having hope. And he stresses that in the episode. So we talk a little bit about how to intentionally do this, both in terms of where we direct our attention and in terms of daily life habits. And then we focus on Dr. Paul's writing, how he developed this habit early on and his grueling, I think he said 130 hours a week of residency to get all of the stress out. So perhaps this will encourage you to pick up a pencil or a pen, who uses pencils, and a pad today, or maybe to start a new habit, one that you find joy in. Okay, on to our guest. Dr. Paul Kaloostian is a neurosurgeon in Los Angeles, as well as an author, researcher, and scientist, having authored over 70 peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts, over 100 book chapters, 12 peer-reviewed scientific textbooks, 2 poetry books, and a novel, which has been nominated for a California Book Award. His books include The Young Neurosurgeon, Lessons from My Patients, and 2 different poetry books, From the Eyes of a Doctor and My Surgical Cases Told in Poems. As a neurosurgeon for over 17 years, Dr. Paul has had the privilege of interacting with numerous patients in a myriad of significant neurological diseases. By sharing his experiences through writing, he is able to convey his duty as a neurosurgeon in a clear and meaningful way in order for patients to understand the healing they are about to go through. And in return, he learned so much from his brave and courageous patients about what it means to be a human struggling with the greatest fight of their lives. All right, guys, on to the show. Paul Kaloostian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
Yes, I am very excited for you to be on today. So I thought we would start this conversation like I start all my conversations, most of them anyway, and just get an idea of your deepest roots from childhood. And I think this will really help set the framework for where we're going today.
Well, I come from a family of physicians, and growing up, we, as you can imagine, talked a lot about medicine. And that was a huge part of our lives, my brother, my sister, and I. As you may imagine, we were pushed hard on school and subjects like math and science, and we really excelled in that. And as time went on, we got to experience a variety of different educational endeavors, such as studying at Harvard, at Brown University, taking courses even at Stanford and other places, and traveling around the United States before college. So I think through all of that, I really was a sponge for knowledge and was motivated to learn more about the nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord and our peripheral nerves, like the nerves at our elbows and wrists and knees. I think once you really learn about what makes up the brain and the spinal cord down to the cellular level, and you learn about how those cells function, it's literally I call it a universe in a cell. One cell is really like a universe. And it's just so impressive at how it functions in a normal state, and then how it doesn't function when there's disease going on. And our job as neurosurgeons is to try to be detectives and figure out what's going on with those cells and how we can try to preserve as much of that as possible for our patients so that they have a good quality of life.
Yeah. Yes. And I know that we're going to dig into that in a minute, but I was looking at your book. I think it was Young Neurosurgeon Lessons from My Patients. And
Yes.
you start the chapter by saying, I never thought I would say all those words in one sentence. I'm a neurosurgeon. But as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so I'm curious, just looking at or reading about what it's like for even just residency. This is intense, like 80-hour weeks. Was there ever a chance that you thought, maybe I'll do something nice like general practice or
Yes, that happens. And you know where I got that line from? The movie Goodfellas, the intro, I think it's the intro, kind of the opening scene. The guy never thought he'd be associated with those guys. He thought those guys in the mafia were cool and all that. Well, I kind of felt the same way about neurosurgery, and I kind of looked up to a lot of people that were the honest people doing good neurosurgical work and really changing the way we practice neurosurgery. And I looked up to them, and I reached that level through a lot of hard work. And yes, it's actually not even 80 hours a week. It's 120, sometimes 130-hour weeks, believe it or not.
I can't believe it.
But you can't tell anyone because that's against the rules. The rules are that in neurosurgical training programs, you cannot go above 80 hours a week. And actually, I think neurosurgery was the only field where they said 88 hours, I believe. For some reason, neurosurgery is different. So they allowed 88 hours for us to be in the hospital in a week. But really, we worked 130 sometimes, just didn't report it, unfortunately, because of other issues I won't go into.
Right.
But a lot of overnights, a lot of sacrifice away from family. Fortunately, I was not married during those times. I don't know how people do it when they're married, have kids, and are doing that kind of hours and training, because you're literally kind of, I guess I can say, neglecting, in a sense, your family, because you have to. There's no alternative when you're doing and training to become a neurosurgeon. So it's a lot of time. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of great moments that are such amazing feelings, like the highest feelings that you could possibly feel. Saving someone's life, other things like that, taking out a huge tumor and they're doing great. And then there's like obviously the lows, the worst lows you can have. People succumbing to their disease, people not improving, people in worse pain. I've seen gunshot wounds to the head, to the spine. I mean, you could just anything you could imagine. I've done it. I was just on call last night. We were talking before we got on the air. I was just on call last night, and quite a few car accidents last night with very sick patients. A couple of older women collapsed because of hemorrhages in their brain, and they're not doing very, very well at all. So in a nutshell, that's kind of neurosurgery for you.
Yeah. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but I guess when you talk about the highest highs, that's probably what keeps you going.
Totally. I mean, I don't think that I felt anything in life as good as being able to, with your heart, your mind, and your hands and time, go in there and help someone, save their life. I mean, it's really almost like you have to go into the structure of the body, the brain or the spinal cord, and kind of rob it. You have to kind of steal that tumor, or you have to take out that blood clot without anyone knowing that you're there, like the brain or the spine. You don't want to wake them up or hurt them in any way. You've got to take the problem off those areas in a stealth manner, and you got to know how to do that. It's almost like the way I think of it is like, on those movies, there's like a series of movies, Ocean's 11, all of that, where they're trying to steal something, and they go to a room where there's all these lasers, and you have to know where those lasers are and where they're not, and so the only way to get through that is to kind of have a pathway that's safe, so that you won't get hurt and you won't hurt the tissue. Well, that's kind of how it is with taking out tumors in the brain and spine and doing other things like that to help patients. You have to avoid key structures like the speech area, the motor area, but yet at the same time, you have to get the job done.
Yes.
How's that for an
I
answer?
love it. I love that answer. I love that answer. Yeah, you have to be very stealth-like. I could just picture you like in, the map of the mind and like trying to, with your laser, like trying to, like go in and rob the tumor.
Like a Jedi Warrior.
Yes, like a Jedi. You are, Paul. That could be your new nickname, the Jedi Warrior of surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if we could switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the just addiction, and more specifically, maybe how addiction affects the brain structure. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of smart people doing a lot of great work out there, a lot of great scientists really helping people in need. It's a big problem now, big homeless population, and a large population of those have psychological problems, have addiction issues, and it's a big burden on society, on the world, honestly. We need to fix this, needs to change. And no one obviously wants to have these issues, but it's a problem that we can't control in some cases. And that's why people end up on the street or end up with serious problems, because the brain is so powerful, and the brain I believe wants to do good for us. It wants to keep us in a routine, and the body will do that. The brain will do that. It'll keep us as happy as it can until there's some sort of insult that's put into our body. For example, you put cigarettes in your body, or cigarette smoke in your body, like nicotine, tobacco, or heroin, or whatever other drugs out there, alcohol. That's an insult. And the brain starts to think, okay, so you're doing it more and more often. So, this must be what the body wants. So the brain starts to say, okay, it secretes all these hormones through the blood. The memory area of the brain, like the hippocampus, start to become activated. The frontal lobes start to become activated. So the brain's like, yeah, this is what this person wants. So the brain's going to want that constantly, because apparently that's what the person wants by putting that in his or her body. So when that happens, the brain starts to keep that routine going. So now you have that new norm. That's a new normal for the brain, for that person, because of these external influences that are now causing the brain to have these hormones secreted more often than usual. And then on top of that, you have these memories of events, like you're at a party and you associate a great time at a party with alcohol because you had fun. You're drinking and getting drunk and a great time, and so now the brain is correlating alcohol with fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so alcohol equals fun from there on out, and same with cigarettes, same with heroin, even marijuana. This is what happens when you have these external influences that take over, in a sense, and that's why addiction is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just know from personal experience, from people coming into my office, and just of knowing people, there's this need to fix the pain, right? To heal the not feeling good enough, to heal the being different than others and not knowing what to do. So they turn to this addiction to fill that hole. And then it's almost impossible for them to stop,
Mm. It's a real problem, unfortunately. I see it a lot in my neurosurgical patients, just because, as you may imagine, alcohol abuse, drug abuse leads to activities, I'll just say, that may be problematic. Okay, so assaults, accidents, car accidents, falls, etc. So I see a lot of head injury and spinal injury patients with a high, let's say, blood levels of ethanol, alcohol. Lots of patients with the urine it's positive for cannabinoids, opiates, all these things. So it's a big problem in my field. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how can the brain and the body sort of heal from addiction? And I know this isn't like an easy formula, but, I'm thinking about specifically the patients that come to see me, and maybe they are sober for a couple of weeks. Maybe it's been a couple of months, but they're never going to feel as good as they felt when they took those drugs. what can you say maybe to those people about how the brain heals a little? Yeah, just a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, we could talk forever really about that, but really,
Sum it up. Yeah.
but the first thing that I always like to say in this instance is that the brain is on your side. Okay. The brain will try to heal always, just like you have a cut on your skin. It's going to heal more often than not. In rare cases, you get an infection or it doesn't heal, and you may need surgery. But as far as I can recall, when I fall and cut myself, it's healed. That's the body's response to external conflict and problems, is to heal. And so the brain is going to want to get to that point to have that homeostasis, we call it, or the kind of that ability to just get back to its normal level.
Mm.
And the other thing I always tell patients is that you have to be confident that you can solve that problem of addiction. You can get through it. You need to have that confidence that you can do this, first of all. And you can. Everyone can. There's never a time where it's too late to beat any addiction at all.
Mm-hmm.
At all. There isn't. And so having that confidence can then now get you, number one, moving forward into, let's say, a variety of different programs. With alcohol, there's, the 12-step program, with smoking cessation counseling, with a variety of other things that are out there for a variety of different problems. But getting into these sort of self-help groups and having colleagues and people that are also addicts and communicating with them and socializing with them and making your lifestyle a life that is positive without those external influences, I think is the solution.
Yeah.
And avoiding activities that will bring you back to the dark side, kind of like the Jedi Warrior.
The Jedi Warrior.
Analogy. Yeah. You don't want to go back to that dark side. You want to stay away from those issues. That may mean not going to these big parties that you used to go to, or it may mean you can go to those parties, just maybe have a Sprite in your hand as opposed to a gallon of beer, or something like that. So there's methods of, in essence, tricking the brain back to its homeostasis, its normal average level. And just people need to know that the normal lifestyle is not meant for us to be like feeling high all the time. That's just not how it is. That's just not life. Life is full of ups and it's full of a lot of downs, but most of the time it's like average. It's like an average day. No matter who you are, you could be worth $10 trillion or homeless, but it's the same. We're all human. We all feel the same way, and it's an average lifestyle. That is how we're meant to be, and we're not meant to be high like that all the time. That's just not healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I liked what you said about having hope. Hope that you are going to beat it, that you are going to heal. That the brain is on your side, and it sounds like time to get to the root cause of the suffering, making sure that you're connecting with people, finding your tribe, and working with other professionals.
I agree.
Yeah. So I know we have a certain amount of time here to talk. I really could, there's so many things that I could say and ask you, but I think maybe we should now go to your books. My surgical cases told in poems, the young neurosurgeon lessons for my patients. Maybe you could talk a little bit now about, how did you get into this writing? Yeah. Why did you just start to do it? How did you get into it? Yeah.
Yeah. I often get that question. It's a very good question. And I think it kind of ties in well to what you had said earlier about the 80-hour work week and the 130-hour work week. It was a safety zone for me, I guess is the best way to put it. In other words, putting in all that time and seeing probably 30,000 patients in my lifetime so far, literally, and seeing every one of them, examining them, looking at their films, most with good outcomes, some with not so good outcomes because of what they had. It takes a toll on you. So, and I always tell my students, my family members, got to have some means of getting out all this stress, I guess, or these feelings that you have, and get it out of you, and show the world also at the same time what we as neurosurgeons, what we as doctors do. Because I feel like a lot of people don't know what we do. People think we're a certain character that they see on ER or on these TV shows.
You mean you're not?
Yeah. I mean, we do wear those scrubs. Okay, don't get me wrong. Like I'm wearing it now, but some of those shows show these scenes where they're operating while the patient's awake.
Yeah.
We do that.
Yeah.
That does happen, but we don't certainly do that in the room that the patient's in. It's in the operating room. So a lot of those shows, they exaggerate, all the relationships that people have with one another. That can happen, but most of the time it's not that exaggerated. And so, like I said, everything's kind of down a notch, that's like reality. Everything's down a notch. But, I needed to just get that out there. And so for me, writing was my catharsis to just kind of decompress. And people kind of know me now as the medical poet. It's kind of my thing, is medical poetry. And people don't know what that really is, but it's really quite simple. It's really me conveying the surgeries that I'm doing in the form of a poem. And I think there's a lot of big words that we use, and we confuse a lot of people. Sometimes I confuse myself and with all these words, and it's like, why do we do that? We need to talk to people, because most people are not in medicine. 99% of people we interact with are not in medicine, and we lose people, and we don't communicate, and we don't bring people together because we're just losing them with all this jargon that we use. So I think poetry is a way to use simple words that rhyme, but yet convey a message of what we do as doctors. And I'm also trying to show how brave my patients are. They're really brave to go through what they go through. And we'll never know that until we actually have those problems that they have and are in that situation that they are in. So that's kind of why I've been writing.
So you see it as cathartic. It's getting all the stress out. So I can definitely see you wanting to write, right? When did you start, or what is your practice like? Is it an everyday situation, or?
Yeah, I started writing in my residency training, because that was when I was just being killed, like literally. You wouldn't believe it, but it was a lot. It was a lot of good times, a lot of bad times, but
wow.
a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And my practice I'm in private practice, which I love. I love the autonomy of private practice. You make your own decisions. You do what you feel is right without any sort of bureaucratic control over it. Medicine is, I think, in a danger zone. I think doctors, unfortunately, don't have a means of coming together. In fact, I think we're more separated, unfortunately. And like, for example, there's no union in medicine. Unfortunately, it's, I think, illegal. I think there may be a law, I think, that prohibits that. So we're kind of like cattle in a sense, that we follow the whims of what society throws your way. And to me, I just feel like autonomy is so valuable in medicine. I think we need to keep that going, and always stick with doing what's right for the patient without really any thought about the monetary issues or about anything else.
Checking those insurance boxes.
Yeah, it really needs to be focused on treating the patient. What do you have? And you may not have a lot of patients that may need surgery. That's just the bottom line. And that may hurt you financially. But if that's what is the right thing to do, that's what you should always focus on. Do the right thing for the patient. It's never the wrong time to do the right thing, as I always like to say.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think your writing has helped others? Because, as you've mentioned already, people don't know what neurosurgeons do. They don't really understand a lot of the jargon. It can be very intimidating. What's maybe some of the feedback that you've gotten, or like, what's your sense? Yeah.
I've gotten great feedback from around the world, really, from people that have read my books. I think they've told me that they enjoyed the use of medicine in poetry, and they've enjoyed understanding more about each of these specific cases that I describe, that are actual cases of mine that I worked on. A lot of patients enjoy reading these either before surgery that I do or after surgery when they're recovering. So it kind of I guess, allows them to spend time kind of healing while reading.
Yeah.
And I think it just gives them a more in-depth understanding that their doctor is someone who cares, their doctor is someone who wants to do the right thing for them, and that most doctors are in it to help people and not to hurt people in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, definitely. How do you think you've changed from the beginning of your writing journey until now?
Hmm. Well, we always change, all of us. On an hourly basis,
Mm,
we're changing, literally. But I think macroscopically, as each day goes by, I really come to appreciate medicine more and more. But I also come to understand a lot of the difficulties in medicine more and more. I'm more fine-tuned with looking a little bit for the problems in hopes of trying to fix it. Unfortunately, medicine is a broken system in my opinion, and it's been that way for a while. And I really want to work with people that are willing to help change medicine for the better. And there's so many ideas I have that we can collaborate on to do that.
mm,
There needs to be a better system that will help not only patients but doctors as well. A lot of doctors are unhappy. Obviously, a lot of patients are unhappy,
mhm.
and and a lot of it stems from the insurance issues and coverage issues and hospital-based issues. But I think as I've gone through medicine, I've seen those issues more and more, and I see them kind of as they happen too, kind of live. And so I'm more cognizant of those issues. I'm also more knowledgeable about the legal issues in medicine. A lot of
Hmm.
doctors go into medicine and we're thrown into the wolves' den,
Right.
honestly, is kind of how I think about it. We don't get any training in the legal system. We don't really at all get told how to document right for the most part, or how to avoid lawsuits, or if you do get involved in a lawsuit, how do you protect yourself?
Right.
Those things we don't get taught that, and it's really something that I've learned more and more about going through my practice and going through medicine. And so I think those are a couple of ways how I've grown over time.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
So I encourage a lot of my listeners and the people that I see in my practice to write, whether it's in a journal or creative writing. I've started a writing practice. I love it. And so, I think that I was drawn to you initially because your work is creative, whether you're, wielding a scalpel or a pen, you're sharing a part of yourself with the greater population. And so, and then also I feel like a lot of what you do mimics a lot of the recovery principles. You're working in the
Yeah.
community, you're giving back, you're definitely being vulnerable, you know.
Right.
All those things that are incredibly scary. So yeah,
Yeah. No, we're certainly not taught to be vulnerable in medicine. You're right.
no to the 10th degree. Yes, exactly. And then you're male, so that's even more of a stigma there.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up, Paul, I'm wondering, do you have any last words that you want to leave with the audience?
I would say, as the famous Joseph Campbell would say, follow your bliss. You can never go wrong if you truly follow your bliss in life.
Very good. Seems like a really good place to end. How can people find you, Paul, on the social and say hi and check out your books?
Sure. You can go to my website, Dr. Paul Writing. That's drpaulwriting.com. You'll find all of my books I've written. I've written numerous textbooks, as well as a lot of the interviews that I've been on over the last few years.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll definitely link to all of that in the show notes. So, Paul, thanks again for being on.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistsandrecovery.com.